Il prossimo incontro, Mercati senza confini, una conversazione con Marta Dassù, direttrice di Aspen, buongiorno e benvenuta, e di Ambasciatore Eisenberg, buongiorno e benvenuto a Capri. Nice to meet you.
Buongiorno.
Lei è là.
So far away. But Marta, I feel so far away.
You're right. This shows the distance, you know.
Sì.
I don't know.
Accorciamo la distanza tra Europa e Stati Uniti. Allora. Accorciamo. No, faccio io, ambasciatore, ma ci mancherebbe altro.
Marta, I look out here, and what I see for Italia, my Italian is not very good, but I see the future. You are the future.
And next time the ambassador will talk in Italian, isn't it?
Sì, sto imparando oggi un po'. So,
He was just telling me that he is taking 3 lessons a week.
yeah, it does not show yet, see, but it will.
Yeah,
Please.
I would need 2 other lessons in English, but I will try to do my best. I don't know why I was asked to speak in English, so forgive me. The general title of our discussion is Markets Without Boundaries, without confini, which is a difficult proposition to make. In fact, we are in a system in which global trade is slowing down. And let us start our conversation from here. Part of the problem stays with this geopolitical clash between the United States and China. For Europe as a whole, this is becoming a problem. We have interests on the American markets. We have a lot of investments. We have a lot of exports. As Italy in particular, there is a vitality of the economic trends between the US and Italy. And yet, we still have, and we have growing interest on the Chinese market. So the idea is that we will find ourselves squeezed in between the US and China. What do you think about it?
I think that China is a dynamic and interesting player in the world that cannot be ignored, but has to be carefully watched. Because so far from the United States point of view, and I think it's shared now globally, they are not abiding by the international rule of law to conduct their business. And so we are responding. We find that they have been playing as a malign influence, as have others using hybrid and different kinds of invasion of privacy, and oftentimes no respect for intellectual property. So it would not be unusual for an Italian company or an American company to do business with China and find that the technology it shared in theory in confidence is now being used to produce identical goods only with a Chinese name. So we can't trade that way. We can't basically face trying to sell United States goods in China where they charge a 25% tariff on a good, and in the United States we charge 2% for them on the same good. May have been okay years ago when China was a much smaller economic force, but today we are trying to even the playing field. So we are doing it through tariffs, and hopefully we will reach negotiation, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you, Luis. I think that we need, first of all, a reform of the WTO. This is one of the issues we are discussing between the EU and the United States in our trade negotiations. Let's hope that we make progress. But there is a more general dimension of this US-European connection, and let's shift to this direction. To be very candid with you, to be very honest and direct, the impression in Europe sometimes is that the current American administration is trying to to dividend rule, we say in Latino or in Italiano, playing a bilateral card instead of a multilateral one vis-à-vis Europe. So what do you think? The US have been part of the solution in Europe since World War II. It was very important to have an Atlantic Europe. You may recall the origin of NATO was, okay, we need to keep the US in, the Russians out, and the Germans down. The fact is that this Atlantic setting was the one that provided trust among us Europeans, and we were able to keep national tensions behind control. It's still true. The America is still part of the solution, or is becoming part of the problem?
So I would say that there should be a strong note that we have had 70 years of a Marshall Plan. We have had 70 years, a little more now, where Italy has been one of the founding members of NATO. And I would suggest to you that that alliance, from the US perspective, has never been stronger. Now, let me make a defining comment on that, because I think, in fairness, you may have misinterpreted what is happening. There has never been a time when the leader of a country elected by a democracy should say his country is not first. Show us the country who has a leader who says that, and you will find a country who says, I, the leader, come first. We don't have those in democracies. Probably the most brilliant example of a democracy in the last 70 years are the people whom I'm looking at here, and the Italian people. I think you've had, I may be wrong, 66 democratic elections. That's not a bad number, because it shows that the people are responding to elect their leaders, and in turn must show respect to the programs they're putting forth, because they're their selection and their leaders, at least to begin. But there's also no hesitancy to change if it's not working. And those changes so far have been peaceful changes of leadership. There are no poisonings of your counterparts. There are no throwing out and putting on islands by themselves those who disagree. We operate as democracies. America has found that over that 70-year period, they have done a significant amount, moved to the economics, in supporting the greatest alliance probably ever known in history, the Atlantic Alliance, which is as strong today from the United States vantage point, and I trust from Italy's, than it has ever been. We are not saying we're reducing our spending. We're saying we have a $21, now $22 trillion deficit ourselves, growing $1 trillion a year. And we're saying everybody in the alliance, which is critical to us. The president said when he began, America first. I've heard that sound echoed here in Italy and in other places around the world. That's not an unnatural sound for a leader to say. But what the president added was, America first, but never alone. The Atlantic Alliance for the United States represents a $1.1 trillion place where we can trade with the safety and security of knowing that our allies respect the same rule of law that we do. And because we do that on a transatlantic basis, we still have that security. Article 5 in NATO stands as a holy grail to watch. The only time Article 5 has ever been used, Article 5, you know, is if one of us is attacked from an outside source, the others will rally to its aid. The only time it's ever been used is on 9/11. And we in the United States felt more than anyone in the world the incredible uniting factor that that article holds. And I personally can tell you the gratitude that is in every American for the outpouring. It may be the most unifying moment in recent history of the world at that time. So I think we face things together. We asked to spread the cost. There was a Wales Accord. Yeah. The Wales Accord said all members of NATO will, over 10 years, from 2014 to 2024, take up 2% of the expense of their own defense, spending 20% of that 2% on things particularly important to that country. What we are waiting for, and we have not yet gotten from Italy and from many of our other allies in the alliance, is even a plan. We want to see a plan that gets our fellow countries to 2%. We're presently carrying over 4%, that's of GDP. The United States is presently carrying almost 4% of their GDP, of our GDP, which is substantial to finance NATO. So I would hardly say that there has been any withdrawal on our part, but a strong answer to share the burdens of defense, which, as I think was said, is counterterrorism, is the encroachment on borders, is the migration problem. We understand the migration problem. Right now, today, we have 4,000 immigrants at our Mexican border coming from all Latin American countries trying to get through the border. We've had that problem now for over 20 years. We understand the problem of immigration. So, no, and a very long answer to a very short question, the alliance stays strong.
Sounds very reassuring. Thanks, Ambassador. With all the needed proportions, we could say that Italy also, we have a government in which we say Italy first, and we say at the same time, but not alone, which is a very important proposition to keep in mind. I would like to ask you about the bilateral relationship. What do you think? It's easy to manage the current Italian government. We have at least a couple of issues on which we can have nuances among us. First, the vexata question of Russia and the sanctions to Russia. Probably today the team will come up again, and in this meeting with the agriculture sector. And then we have the Mediterranean issues. Iran, for instance. Italy cherishes, Italy stays with the nuclear deal. I would like to know your opinion on that. And then we have a big theater of convergence, the management of the crisis in Libya, which is a clear national interest for Italy. We think that the 2011 intervention was probably a mistake, but then we have to try to reach a solution now. So, Russia, Iran, Libya, where do we stand as allies?
I think you asked me 3 questions, and if I take as long to answer each one, you'll be here till tonight, based on my first answer. So let me start with Russia. Russia is the largest country in the world, not just in Europe. It is the largest country in the world. It has the 8th most inhabitants on part of that country. The United States and Europe would like, I am sure, the same thing. We'd like nothing more than have a friend in Russia who shares the same goals, particularly as it comes to respect of internationally, legally established borders. We, America, fight for those borders to protect them, and Italy faces its own challenge on those borders. The only country that has basically taken territory by force in the last 70 years is Russia. And so our hope is that through dialogue, and our president believes in starting dialogue at the top, so he has reached out for President Putin, and he will again, through dialogue, through diplomacy, and then a tool of diplomacy, sanctions, we can convince Russia that complying with the Minsk Accord, which they signed, and withdrawing from the Ukraine, Georgia, Crimea, that have been taken by force or by means that are hard to define, not only can we have peace in that region, there are 10,000 lives a year being lost. 10,000 lives have been lost in the Ukraine. They're still fighting a bloody war in the eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass. Russia has the power alone to basically solve that. And I think it to be all of the world's interest to have Russia and the United States working together on the other problems. As far as Iran, on November 4th, the sanctions will go on. It has some financial impact on some, and that's hurtful. But we believe that the intent of the JCPOA was not met with its intent.
Iran nuclear deal, the
Yes,
JCPOA.
the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah.
When it was announced by their leader that they now had produced and were producing intercontinental ballistic missiles, and specifically said they could hit various places in the United States and wipe out allies in Europe, that was not part of the intent of any accord, and it has become our belief through study that the sunset clause was way too short and had to be lengthened, and we gave months to our allies, Italy, France, the UK, Germany, to try and negotiate a way that would include the halt in production of those missiles and discussion on a sunset clause. And to this moment, as we sit here, we have gotten none. So we are going to withdraw. And again, we think war is not a good resort to solving any problems, and sanctions still are the best tool. We're targeting them. They're not going at specific industries right now. They're going at specific individuals who control billions and billions and billions of dollars of industry and who are close to the nub of power, with the hope that they will persuade the government to do what is most helpful to us.
Thanks a lot. Yes, unfortunately, our time has elapsed. Let me only close here saying that really I think that the old Atlantic setting is in decline, given the new trends we have been trying to describe, but a new Atlantic deal is absolutely necessary for Europe to be able to stay united and to compete in the global world. So thanks. I hope that Italy and the US can do that.
Marta, you can. I will only end by saying this, and I know it's seldom that I say I speak for the government of the United States, but when Prime Minister left the meeting in the White House after a long discussion, the President offered a strategic relationship on the Mediterranean, which would put Italy in the forefront of helping and working to solve some of the problems. It will be unique in that respect. And so the trust and the value of Italy as a friend and partner of many years, and the 20 million Italians who are my neighbors in New York and New Jersey when I'm there, I can tell you that our bonds have never been stronger. Thank you.
Thank you.